Hi, guys. Welcome to episode 2 of the Pain to Power podcast. I'm your host, Justin Banks, and I thank God for giving me this gift of recording episode 2. I thank Him and I hope that He can use me for His good. Now, I told myself before this episode to not fake it. Don't give some generic message that everyone knows. Talk your own talk, so people can know what you're talking about is real. I would be remiss to talk about pain and its issues and never bring up mine. It's like teaching math when you've never studied it or coaching a sport when you've never played it. I don't know all the lessons of pain, but I do know my own. And I know this message can specifically help a lot of people who are experiencing their pain in the shadows. They experience it on the inside, but you see the smiles and laughs on the outside. They smile and say they're happy so much that they hope one day they'll believe it. I know that experience firsthand. Now, to the people listening, allow me to be vulnerable and talk about mental health, specifically my own. To some of the individuals listening, you've known me well, and you may have known me a long time. You've seen me play sports, you've been my coworker or my family, but maybe some of you have not heard me go in detail about my testimony as I will now. Maybe you don't know me at all, but something brought you to this episode because you may have had bouts of mental health before or you're experiencing it now. I pray that this message has found you and it gives you courage to know that you're not alone and you're not defeated. Now, I'm someone who hates and despises to be vulnerable. I hate to show my own weakness and show that I'm human. I would think that if I let someone see my storm, that it will cause shame. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying let all your business out because people will try to use and abuse you for their manipulation and gain. I'm able to tell my story now because I work to take the power back from mental illness, specifically my anxiety. But also hearing stories from others has helped me tremendously. I'm not talking about just the sob stories, but I'm talking about redemption stories. People that got knocked down but fought back and won. Think about it this way. Do you know how a rainbow is formed? A storm can be dangerous and it can be deadly. Each drop of water combined with the wind and lightning can cause destruction. But once the light disperses into those water droplets, in times it creates a spectrum of light, which turns that dangerous storm into beauty and into that rainbow. I was once in a storm, and I witnessed the storm's destruction. But once the light was dispersed into my own storm, I was finally able to see the beauty in my struggle. As said before, the struggle I'm talking about is anxiety. And to this day, it is still tough to talk about. I have struggled with anxiety most of my life. Now, let's be clear. Everyone has some form of anxiousness or some form of worry. We can all worry about the results of a test or being nervous for a job interview. But I'm talking about being so nervous that you can no longer function, and it has had to be diagnosed because of its seriousness. I knew I was struggling with it officially in college, but now I've realized that I was dealing with it most of my life. Some people have anxiety in social situations, and they don't like to interact with people. They create unrealistic fears, and they're afraid of being judged or humiliated. They can be afraid of potential embarrassment, feeling the more people that are around, the closer they are to their worst fears coming true. Others have panic disorders, again associated with the fear of something awful happening to them. That has got to be some kind of scary, believing that no matter who you are or who you are with, you believe something awful is going to happen to you. This term is not used as often anymore, but some individuals can be called hypochondriacs, fearing that they have some underlying disease or condition that can bring them to death. Now imagine that person in this day and time. In the past, they may have already believed they had some kind of debilitating sickness bringing them closer to death, and now there is a legitimate fear of contracting a deadly virus. Think about that fear that person is experiencing, already believing they're having a disease, and now they're feeling ambushed with the fear of having COVID-19. When being diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, you are basically being told that you have irrational fears, and that is very true. And I say this from experience. Now, when it comes to me, I have something that is called generalized anxiety, which basically means you worry about everything. That means you can worry about being in social environments. I was afraid of being in social environments. There were moments of panic, feeling like there was impending doom coming to my life. I felt like I had physical ailments and health issues, deadly health issues that brought me to hospitals, taking tests that brought more fear, wondering what those results are going to be. This didn't just happen in college. Now I know anxiety has been battling me as long as I can remember. I'm talking about first grade. I remember the first day going to school feeling fine because my dad was right there with me. When he left me there, I cried like a baby. Now, this can happen sometimes. You see little kids cry every now and then for small things, especially in elementary school. But then I cried the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. You follow this pattern, and you will see it finally end in March of that school year. I don't know why I stopped, but for some reason I did. And I truly thank my teacher. I know she was happy, and I thank her for her own patience. The second grade comes, and I'm feeling so relieved on the way to school, leaving the last year behind me. I walk into my second grade class, say hi to my teacher, and take my seat, and I begin to feel so nervous. I don't know why I was nervous, but that fear sank right in my gut and traveled like a disease to the rest of my body until it reached my eyes and converted to tears. I began crying once again, and it did not end until March of next year. What was I so scared of for so long, to the point where I am shedding tears every day? Now, September to March is 7 months being passed, which is a little over 200 days, and I did it for 2 years. I had over 400 days of crying before I turned 8 years old. Thank goodness the tears left by third grade, but things began to change a bit in middle school. I would get stomach aches during middle school, sometimes before and during the test, or when I didn't understand an assignment. Not understanding an assignment is normal, but it would make me nervous because I thought I would fail these assignments and would eventually get an F in that class. All I had to do was ask my teacher a question, I would be just fine. But not understanding one concept made me fear failure, even though I was a 4.0 student throughout middle school. You can see from that standpoint that my fear was a bit irrational. Now, transition to high school, and the symptoms went from stomach aches to headaches. I went to Renaissance High School in Detroit, so the classwork can be a little vigorous at times, and the headache can come every now and then. When they don't go away, though, that's when it becomes a little weird. When they pop up when I'm worried about little things, that's not totally normal. Still, with that being said, I made it through elementary, middle, and high school very well. I had great grades throughout, was never a behavior problem, and was now on my way to start college. For years now, though, I was experiencing some physical ailment or pain related to my own fears or worry. I didn't worry about it too much, though, because I was doing fine relatively in life. I was still going to higher education and was going to play football as well. But an important lesson in all of this is that no one really knew I was experiencing these symptoms. There are so many stigmas regarding mental illness. One of which is that mental illness means that you are dramatic with your actions. You're looking at what society would call crazy or dramatic or very much out of whack. Something was wrong with me and no one even knew it. I could barely recognize it myself, but there are so many people feeling this way or worse, mentally broken, but smiling every day, getting good grades, looking like a typical person, doing the right things and enjoying life. Once that person is alone, though, and it is only them and their thoughts, that person's shadow grows big and visible, and it haunts them, doing everything in its power to destroy them. So many young students are falling victim to suicide like never before. Students that people thought were great kids with bright futures all of a sudden are killing themselves. And it's a shock to the community around them. Well, they were in pain long before they took their life. One issue is that it can be hard to see the signs as people cover up. Another issue is that sometimes signs are shown, but they are brushed off, believing that their behavior is just puberty and a teen being moody. This leads to the next problem, which is that many students do not have safe outlets where they can express themselves freely. Thank goodness I had a rare two-parent household where I could talk to my parents about issues. Every child doesn't have that, and when they can't speak freely about how they feel, they internalize it until they explode, harming themselves and others. As someone who works with youth as a career, I can tell you that we need to stop believing that a child can't be stressed. If a child can't eat every day, then they are stressed. If they have a parent coming in and out of their lives, that causes stress. If no one in their family has never been to college and the family puts pressure on them to be the first to go to the next level, it causes stress, mainly because a lot of the kids now see themselves as the savior of the family, and that puts immense pressure on them. Also, a lot of these kids don't know the process of applying to college, and then they're trying to raise money for room and board or for books, living on a fixed income. That would stress any teenager out. And if I can't talk to someone about these problems, I assume I'm on my own and I will smile in your face, but I will be angry on the inside. When you create a whatever happens mentality, usually what happens is something destructive and dangerous. This is what many of our youth are facing. So we need to have more conversations about this, but I'm going to take it a step further because a lot of the time we have these conversations just for PR and never act on them. We need to act to save our babies so they can live the life they were destined to live. It is so necessary that adults speak up for them and the voices of the youth are heard. Now let's transition to college. College isn't something I should regret because it made me the man I am, but still, I kind of regret not enjoying my college experience. This is when I really faced anxiety face to face. It was beaten to my rock bottom. First off, I had no idea what to expect in college. I was fine all the way up until the day before we left as a family to go to school. And the night before, I finally realized that I was about to be on my own. That's not a good place to be when you're already afraid of a lot of things. To make it worse, I wasn't even going to school in Michigan. I spent my first year and a half at Valparaiso University in Valparaiso, Indiana. To be clear, Valpo is the exact opposite of Detroit, Michigan. I'm used to larger schools like Wayne State and University of Michigan, and I'm now going to a school of 6,000 and only 100 of these students are black. In one day, my 17-year-old self was in an entirely new culture, and that is scary. Here's why anxiety really began to explode. For the first time, I had no comfort zone around me at all. When I would have anxiety or had those physical symptoms, I could just go home and those symptoms would go away. Mom would make something good to eat and I would just lay back and chill. There's no need to worry when you don't have to fight anymore. Now I'm 4 hours away, and when the bad days come, I don't have my mom and dad to come home to. I'm grown now, and all I have is my dorm room and my thoughts. Thank God that I was able to form some lifelong friends because without them, I don't know what I would have done to get out of that place. I also had that savior's mentality, hoping that I can make it to the NFL and get my family into better times. My dad began to get a little sick at this time too, so I wanted to try to do something and take him places that he always wanted to go. I wanted my family to do things they always wanted to do, but with every injury I had, it was like a blow to that dream, and I was afraid of the outcome of never playing football again. After a bad concussion, I eventually stopped playing and was able to transfer to Western Michigan University. I was so happy to be going to a school where a lot of my Renaissance friends were, but I was a totally different person once I arrived. The damage had already been done from feeling so isolated with my thoughts and not knowing how to release them. So I internalized them. And through this process of quitting football, I lost all sense of confidence in who I was as a person. So the person that they were so close to in high school were getting the shell of the Justin Banks they once remembered. I was so quiet and so shy when I transferred. My friends had also made more friends, but these new friends were meeting someone with no self-esteem or any confidence. So they met someone extremely shy, not saying much to them, never going out on the weekends or to parties, and I'm sure to many I looked like a bit of a weirdo. I was someone who was sometimes there, and when I was there, it really wasn't me. It was just this body who haven't discovered his own true spirit. I just knew my negative thoughts, and it followed me everywhere. Eventually, it led to my friends seeing me a lot less, and it would surprise them when I would pop up to an event. Now, it could be a little funny at the time, but honestly, I felt so bad that I couldn't go and hang out with my friends. It wasn't that I didn't want to, but I was so scared, so fearful to leave my dorm room. If I left my dorm room for something outside of going to class, I was so afraid that people would see what I saw in myself, and that was nothing. They would see a grown man with no self-confidence walking with a cloud of shame and embarrassment as I walked on my rock bottom. This is when the social anxiety really started to hit. I was afraid that I would be offended or offend someone. I feared being judged by many. I felt so unattractive, so I secluded to my places of refuge. I ate in places where many people weren't there. I went to buildings and went to floors where people didn't usually go. Rather than get on a crowded bus, I would walk 10 minutes in a foot of snow to get to class so people cannot see me and I cannot see them. Once I made eye contact with someone, I would get scared to death, and I ran from that as much as I could. Lastly, I isolated myself to my dorm room. I had my own room, and I sat with my negative thoughts, and it beat me up every day. This is when all the symptoms began to show up at once. I sat in my room having difficulty sleeping. I would sweat and tremble and feel pain, and this made me worry about everything. This pain that I was feeling made me think that I had illnesses or disease, and I never wanted to talk to people, afraid of criticism I might get from them, and I worried about my own future, wondering what would I do when I failed a test or missed class. The plan was to go to school for physical therapy. Anytime I struggled with the class, I thought about that physical therapist dream not happening and being left to struggle and find some kind of job just to make ends meet. If that goal didn't happen, I thought that I would be a failure and I would have no way to provide for my family. Then I would think about the mistakes I made in the past. How often do we do that? Maybe I should have studied longer or done better on that assignment, and I would have put myself on a better path to success. Now I'm on the path to failure. Now, if you follow this train of thought, You can tell that I would always think about my future and I would always think about my past. My focus was never on the present. My focus was never on my true reality. And when you can't think in the present moment, you create scenarios in your head that provide more fear in your life. Even though none of these scenarios have happened or even have a chance of happening. Have you experienced these symptoms? Have you ever behaved or thought in this way? You may experience these symptoms sometimes, but if you feel like this is consistently happening to you and it's stopping you from being productive, meaning it's hard to concentrate and stay on task, you're irritable and restless, distressed, having nausea and headaches or palpitations, then that means you need some form of help. And there's nothing wrong with getting help. Now, I can give story after story of situations where anxiety took over my life, but I want to transition from the sob story and show my redemption, my escape from rock bottom. All of the symptoms I said before, I was feeling every day. And it began to really hurt that I couldn't go anywhere and have the desire to do anything, but that was because my brain was operating that fight or flight syndrome. Imagine a bear chasing after you and the fear that you will feel. The brain can release the same amount of chemicals in that scary situation and release the same amount in a person with chronic anxiety because we are fearful of a number of irrational things. There were times I wanted to hang out, but I knew that bear was outside. I knew I wanted to try to talk to that girl and tell her I liked her, but that bear and that fear, it kept me quiet. Usually you want to wake up from a nightmare to feel better. I wanted to sleep because the nightmare occurred when my eyes opened. I don't know if I'm creating the picture vividly enough, but I cannot stress how afraid, how alone, how isolated, and how scared I was. And not to mention my dad was becoming more sick, and not to mention I had to complete school to graduate, and that's stressful enough. Man, I shed so many tears in that dorm room. Now think about someone who was suicidal, who also feels like when they're awake, it's a nightmare and they wish they could just end it. The thoughts of an untreated, mentally ill person can be so harmful. Check on your friends and see how they are doing, especially during this health crisis. And let's get to the good part, the happy part. I was able to call my parents and talk to them, thankfully, and they were just as worried as I was. I was afraid that I had a bunch of illnesses and I went to the hospital and was tested for them all. Now think of the major illnesses and diseases that are out there, and I probably was tested for it. Now you would think that would bring reassurance if all the results came back negative. When you're anxious and you overthink, you wonder it must be something else they haven't looked at. Maybe they did the test wrong. I have all these symptoms. I have to be sick with something. And make the mistake of looking up your symptoms on WebMD and you go down a dangerous dark rabbit hole. I was not well, man. So I talked to my parents and we all agreed that I needed to come home. I came home a week before spring break and we were worried that I may not be able to finish the semester or even my college career. Now, my dad wasn't the best at all on searching on the internet, but he still found some info that helped me dramatically. He printed out some info on the website, and it was just a message board of people talking. I looked at the title of the message board, and the people had anxiety. I read the things they were saying, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I think I felt relief. I'm reading what people are saying, and I'm like, wait, I felt that before. I'm afraid of going out. I think I'm sick with an illness. I sweat sometimes. I can't sleep. I felt what you felt. So I'm not alone in this? Sometimes there is no better feeling than going through something and knowing you're not alone in the fight. So I kept researching symptoms and treatment, and I decided I needed to go to counseling. And it was the best decision of my life. So often we follow the trend of saying that therapy doesn't work. Now, all therapists aren't created equal, but there are some amazing ones out there who only want the best for you. We always say something is bad or doesn't work when it makes us uncomfortable. You get out what you put in when it comes to counseling. If you don't express yourself, if you don't tell them how you're feeling, a therapist can only do so much. They're not psychics, so you have to help them help you. Also, the goal isn't for a therapist to give you medication. Everyone doesn't need medicine, but there is a stigma around medication as well. Getting some Tylenol or some cholesterol medication is fine because there isn't much stigma around it. You need some medication for your brain, and immediately we say it does not work, and that's not always true either. There are some individuals who are on a bunch of medications and have a lot of side effects, but that isn't everybody. And a therapist is not coming in there with the intention of wanting to prescribe you something. The good therapists want what's best for you. And that could just be a change in your lifestyle, not prescription drugs. Now for me, I needed prescription drugs. But this wasn't the best part of me fighting back against my anxiety. I wasn't too good at the prayer thing yet, so I started watching some sermons, started learning a little bit, and I started making some simple prayers out of my desperation. I said, God, my way clearly isn't working. So can you put me on the path you want for me? I don't know who I'm supposed to be around, but can you put me around people that can help me grow and become the right person? Can I become the right person for you so I can serve you? I said that prayer every day, and let me tell you how God works. Now, I had a few therapists, and they all were great, but one that I had really struck out because he was a black man. I started going to counseling in college and had a therapist that could connect with me, understanding my mental state. He could connect with me, understanding me as a man, and he could connect with me, understanding my plight as a black man. You can't tell me God didn't do that. You can't tell me God is a real, didn't answer that prayer for me. It gets better though. So he says, I want to start a group session for men and I want you to come. I walk in, it's a small space and it's only about 6 of us. But we were all black men in college. It's tough having a black man express himself at all, I will admit. But now we have 6 of us in a room together talking about our struggles. It's unheard of, it felt like a miracle, and I believe that God was working for sure. We created a brotherhood through our hardships. I could give one of those guys a head nod when I would see him on campus, and a way to make sure we were all good. No one else needed to know our issues, but it was cool to be able to check on somebody and for somebody to check on me. None of this probably would have happened, number one, unless we had a black man as our therapist. We need more people of color in healthcare, especially in the mental health sector, to defeat stigmas and provide normality to people of color who need help. This also wouldn't have worked for me if I came in there with a negative mindset. I came in there wanting help for myself. Through all of my pain, there was still a small part of me that had dreams and wanted to see who I could be as my best self. And I held on tight to that, trying to find that hope, that solution, and that salvation. I didn't just sit there and just expect the miracle. I did the work, and God provided the miracle too. Now, fast forward to now. I have been off of medication for 2 years now. I'm doing so much better. I've changed my lifestyle around a little, still exercising, trying to eat right, and also practicing mindfulness. I also am trying to be more outgoing and face my fears of social interaction. And I'm so much better than where I was before. I can go out not feeling judged or ridiculed. And if I do, that's fine. I have enough confidence in myself to know who I am and not worry about negative things that someone has said to me or thinks about me. I love myself first. Now, this anxiety battle is still ongoing, but I have been whooping this behind for a while now. I may get a few issues here and there, but it doesn't break me. I can still speak, I can work to inspire the youth, and I can go after my dreams. Now, I let out a whole lot in this episode, but I truly wanted to show some of my pain to power journey. I pray that this reach somebody. I pray that this helps somebody in some kind of way. God, show me that you brought me through that test to provide testimony for others. Can I help create a rainbow in someone's storm? I just pray that your will be done. Now, I want to end this episode with our Pain to Power quote, and it says there is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will. That means if you can't control it, don't worry about it, and the things you can control, handle it with your best intentions, with max effort, letting God command your actions. Now, I love you, I thank you, and I want you to be powerful.